to the webinar today, the North Main Street Cultural Connector Project. Everybody join the webinar today on mute for audio clarity. We would ask that you use the Q&A button that should be in the middle of your screen on the bottom to submit questions. You can submit them throughout the presentation, and we will address them at the end of the presentation. I'm Emily Smith. I'm the Director of Transportation for Fisher Associates, and with me today presenting this topic are Dennis Judson, our Client Service Manager and our Project Manager for this particular project, and Andrew Avery, the Public Works Commissioner for Chemung County and the City of Elmira.
Thanks, everybody. I appreciate your time on this hot summer day for taking time to observe this video. Is a very exciting project. The primary purpose of the presentation is to just discuss some of the different challenges associated with the design and construction of an urban roundabout, specifically the one at North Main Street in Elmira. The agenda today, we'll talk about my computer's being a little slow, so I apologize. Agenda today, I want to talk about a little bit about the ownership, the location, history, some of the objectives, talk about specifics of the project, existing conditions, and then it's the majority of the project is talk about some of the project challenges that we had along the way, and then we'll end it with some construction photos and open it up to questions. The project owner is the City of Elmira, and Andy Avery, who is the Commissioner of the Chemung County DPW, also oversees all the street design projects for the City of Elmira. And I want to thank Andy, his staff, both the county and the city, for their guidance throughout the project. It certainly wouldn't have been possible without them and without him specifically. And Andy's gonna take you through the history of the project, and then we'll get back to some of the technical stuff.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Elmira, if you're not familiar with it, is, yes, it's in New York. It's in the southern tier. We're about 5 miles from the Pennsylvania border. We also don't have a ton of snow here compared to some of you along the lake regions and other parts of the state. We typically get under 40 inches a year, just to put it in perspective. So snow removal isn't as big an issue for us on roundabouts. Our project area is actually at the very heart of our downtown, between Elmira College and our business district and commercial district. We're located near a McDonald's, a Weiss shopping market, a Walgreens. So a lot going on in this direct area. Really, this shows you how important a comprehensive master plan is. You're not planning for tomorrow, you're planning for decades down the road. We started this project in 1998 with our last comprehensive master plan update. We were looking to strengthen our infrastructure, our roads, our bridges, colleges. We have Elmira College, we have a Corning Community College campus, and now we have LECOM, which is Lake Erie College of Osteopathic Medicine, that has a new campus in Elmira. Also wanted to make sure that we took care of our manufacturing businesses, recreation for our residents, and try to maintain quality neighborhoods. I myself live in Elmira, so I want to make sure that this is a great place to live and work. We're looking to improve vehicular circulation, pedestrian routes, and really reconnect those neighborhoods to the downtown. We're not just an automotive society anymore. We like to walk, we like to bike, and we want to make sure we got this right. North Main Street was actually selected many years ago as a catalytic corridor. And we looked at streetscape pedestrian improvements. We wanted to encourage investment in the area. And really, this goes back to 2006. when we partnered with DOT and Elmira College to study the corridor from 2nd Street to Washington Avenue. This took us all the way to basically the northern end of Elmira College. We looked at 3 phases. Phase 1 from 5th Street to Washington Avenue, Phase 2, West Clinton to 5th, and then Phase 3, 3rd to Clinton. This roundabout is actually Phase 3. We'll talk more about that, but Phases 1 and 2 have also all been completed. So Phase 1 was completed in 2009. It's the section highlighted in blue on your visual. That included some traffic calming, some narrowing of the road, basically a table, a chicane, to really slow traffic down behind Elmira College, because North Main Street is a one-way north road in this area, and it was getting some pretty high speeds. Phase 2, preliminary planning for the section below 5th Street down to the 2nd, 3rd Street, and in this case, Clinton Street area. This was originally intended to be a federal aid project, but we did it in-house. We did new sidewalks, new curbing. We actually worked with Hilliard Corporation, which you see just to the right of the red highlighted area, and they paid for about half the sidewalks. So it was a great, really a great collaborative effort between business and government. Phase 3, which is this project, was shown in yellow, and Dennis will talk about, and we'll touch on how we really extended that further than just the original study from 2006. So in 2013, we applied for a STEP application, which Strategic Transportation Enhancement Program. That was competitive statewide. We wanted to expand the project to include more of North Main Street down to 3rd Street and 2nd Street, all the way to the viaduct. And it's important to note that we wanted to go to the railroad viaduct because it connected directly to our Elmira Promenade project from earlier, which now we have a completed pedestrian bicycle corridor from the northern end of Elmira College all the way to the river. So that was an important part for us. This project became known as the North Main Street Cultural Connector. We did receive $3.6 million of funding for the overall $4.5 million project. When I say the 3.6, that was federal, state funding that really got us a big part of the way toward completion.
So Andy mentioned, recall, the name of the project is actually the North Main Street Cultural Connector. And you might ask why, and Andy talked about a little bit of it, but let's just show you graphically. Here's the location of the Elmira College, just north of the project limits, the educational center for the city. Then we have the Chemung Riverfront, which is being continuously developed. They're using a lot of DRI monies, the state's DRI money, to do a lot of redevelopment in the area. And just because you're on the waterfront, it attracts people. The Elmira Promenade that Andy mentioned, it was a refurbished railroad viaduct that was done about 7 or 8 years ago with the intent of drawing festivals, music, and just drawing people gathering to another part of the downtown area. In and around these two places was all the cultural centers for the city, the art museum, the history center, and a lot of the government activities as well. So this project came along, and it kind of makes sense that what this did is create a cultural connector and allowed people to walk safely to and from the different cultural centers in the city. So actually quite simple, but it has been a huge benefit to the city of Elmira. So here's the project we have today. It's in its entirety. It's North Main Street from West Clinton down to 3rd, and 2nd Street from North Main Street to the railroad viaduct. This will complete the cultural connector. Like most projects, we have project objectives. These are similar to some of the other ones you've seen in other projects. We wanted to make the pavement a lot better so it lasts a lot longer. Like most older cities, pavements don't get a lot of attention over time, just general maintenance. So we want to make sure we create something that's going to last forever, or last a long time. We want to improve the pedestrian facilities. There's a lot of existing sidewalks out there that have tripping hazards and don't meet ADA standards, so we want to improve those facilities. The primary focus of the project is to improve the intersection geometry at the North Main Street, 3rd Street intersection, and also as Park Place plays a part in that as well. But with an ultimate goal of reducing the potential for crashes and increasing safety for all modes of transportation. And then finally, we wanted to create a complete street corridor, including the installation of pedestrian amenities, lighting, landscape elements, and other aesthetic features to make the area more welcoming. So what's really the big issue? This picture kind of identifies what the primary issue is. You're looking north, just south of the 3rd Street intersection. The 3rd Street enters the North Main Street just north of that green light pole. And as you can see, there's a massive amount of pavement in here with very little direction from both signing or striping on where you're supposed to be. Really, the only spot you really know where you're supposed to be is if you're in that red car on the left-hand side of the photo coming southbound at us, you got to stay to the right side of the yellow line. If you're a visitor or someone heading north here, where do I go? North Main Street, as Andy mentioned, on the right is a continuous one-way north bound street on the right sides of the split. And then the other side of the split heading to the left is Park Place, when it just gets north of the point there. And that takes you into the educational center up to Elmira College. From a pedestrian standpoint, you see very few markings. Pedestrians really have a difficult time knowing where traffic is going. And I'll show you a video in a second and talk about some of that stuff in a second about how pedestrians really have a tough time getting across the street here. So in its entirety, the project is this: total reconstruction of the roadway within the highlighted areas and the areas I talked about. New pavement, new curbs, new sidewalks, new signing, new striping, new landscaping, upgraded signals, improved and upgraded public utilities, and then the primary focus is the design and construction of a modern roundabout at the subject intersection. Lots of coordination throughout the project, as you might imagine in a city. We have the City of Elmira, New York State DOT, and FHWA who provided the guidance and the funding. Elmira Water Board and the DEC who played a role in helping get us permitting and upgrading existing public utilities, along with the Chemung County Sewer District. Public utilities, they were very helpful here. They got out of the way early. I'll talk about that in a couple minutes. The emergency services, the fire department, police, we had a lot of coordination with them to make sure that they understood that this project was going to enhance their ability to maneuver through this intersection more efficiently and safely. And in fact, there is a fire station right on the project on 2nd Street, so they had a significant impact. And then a couple other entities that played a role. Elmira Downtown Development was a major factor in helping us get all the businesses together in one place to talk with them. And then a entity that was created during this project, not necessarily as a result of this project, I'm sure it didn't hurt, but the development of the community arts of Elmira, and they played a pretty big role in the development of a lot of the aesthetic enhancements. And then of course there was the consultant team. Area businesses, there are many of them in the project corridor. Some of them were impacted more than others. McDonald's, for instance, had a major impact, and we'll talk about them. Other than Sunoco had minor impacts, but they all needed to understand the benefits of this and how this new roundabout would affect their business, not only during construction, but after construction. The fire station, I neglected to identify, that's at the lower left-hand corner of the photo on 2nd Street. A little bit about the existing conditions. Like most cities, keeping up with all your pavement, sidewalks, and utilities is an endless task. Not a lot of money in many cities. So stuff tends to not get taken care of as soon as it needs to be. Here's a perfect example of the pavement and drainage in the corridor, in pretty rough shape and certainly in need of reconstruction. The photo in the top left was taken at the point area, at the split area, some significant drainage issues. Sidewalks existed or exist throughout the entire project corridor. Some of them in rough shape, as you can see by the photo to the left. Some of them narrow and of different surface treatments. There was some areas where there was some newer sidewalk put in by either city forces to repair some real poor sidewalks or by development. And when the city or the development put stuff in place, they did everything they could to meet the ADA regulations at the time. However, as you know, they change over time regularly. And at the time of the design and construction, really there was none of it meeting the current ADA standards. So that all had to be brought up to standard. Utility companies and utilities, talk about the private ones first. The City of Elmira does a great job of coordinating early on with all the utility companies. They knew this project schedule well ahead of time, the private ones did. And really, they got out of the way before we even started design. So with the exception of just minor connections for upgraded signals and lighting, the private utilities were out of the way well in advance of the project even started. The public utilities, water and sewer, mostly I'm talking about here, you can see they go right through the roundabout, and we needed to address them during the design and the construction, and we'll talk about that in more detail. From a traffic standpoint, we did the typical stuff, updating and collecting traffic volumes for all modes of transportation, doing our level of service analysis, and it was indicated that the volumes through the intersection were about 1,100 vehicles per hour, which equates to a little over 12,000 vehicles in a day. And for those of you who don't know, a single lane roundabout can accommodate a little over 2,000 vehicles an hour. So it really wasn't about the volumes, and certainly not just about the volumes here, because the roundabout could handle the volumes. It's really redoing the intersection with a roundabout was really about accessibility for businesses, maneuverability for delivery vehicles, emergency services, transit, school buses, make sure they could get through this intersection more safe and more efficiently. And we also wanted the businesses to know how their businesses would be operating, how they would access their businesses after this was all done. And in addition, we needed to accommodate all the modes of transportation. We also had to look at the crash history. When we did the design report, we studied the most recent 3-year history. And at that time, there was 22 crashes in the previous 3 years in the project area. 10 of them of note were at the specific intersection at 3rd Street, North Main Street intersection. We then looked at the previous 7 years, so 10 years in total. And then at that specific intersection, there was 24 accidents. So as you can see, the 7 years leading up to the 3, there was 14, and then 10 in the last 3. So the number of accidents was increasing. That's not a good thing. In fact, the crash rates averaged over 5 times the statewide average for similar facilities. So making it safer for everyone was important. A little bit of summary of some of the accidents happen out there. Of note, 3 of the accidents were either pedestrians or bicyclists. And then of specific note, 9 right angle accidents occurred at 3rd Street. I think we can primarily relate that to the expansive amount of pavement, people not knowing where other people are going or turning. And I can tell you that we observed a lot of different traffic maneuvers in our field observations. Here I'm showing in the black dashed lines the quote unquote legal moves that vehicles are allowed to make at this intersection. And then the blue is identifying the typical typical path that the pedestrians would make. Well, I can tell you that vehicles came out of 3rd Street, turning into 3rd Street. They'd get in the middle of that mass of pavement and really not know what to do, not know where the oncoming traffic was coming from. So they'd sit there. Sometimes they'd change their mind and go further south. But it really confused the pedestrians because the pedestrians really didn't know what any of the traffic was going to be doing, or a lot of the traffic wasn't going to be doing. So a lot of unusual things happening in the intersection, primarily because of the massive amount of pavement. I'll talk a little bit about some of those pedestrian moves. The typical standard move across the intersection, shortest path, would be perpendicular across at 3rd Street. It's about 70 feet long, not untypical for an urban setting. Exposes you to traffic for about 20 seconds. And remember, this is uncontrolled traffic up north to south. But what we observed the overwhelming majority of the time, because a lot of pedestrians were coming from the north, the college area, or from some senior living or some low-income housing that maybe didn't have cars, or going northbound the opposite way, they would take that diagonal route, which is now you're exposed twice as much, almost 130 feet, and almost twice the amount of exposure to traffic. So some dangerous situations. But the numbers don't necessarily tell the whole story, just those distances in time. I want to show you a really brief video of a young family trying to get across. I wish I would have had my video ready when this was happening. There was about 15 seconds of this that occurred ahead of this, but you can see in the trying to cross is a young, assumed it's a young family, 2 young boys and a young child in a stroller. And they had made already several attempts to try to get across the roadway. And they'll make a couple attempts here. They try one time, they back off, and now they start again, but then they don't know, they maybe not know where that silver car was going, so they backed up. I can happily tell you that they did make it across safely, but that is just one occurrence that happened on a regular basis at this intersection, in or near this intersection. Here's a graphic that many of you have seen before, I'm sure. It just talks, we're trying to show the conflict points. On the left side, the red dots are indicating the 45 different vehicle-to-vehicle conflict points in this 5-legged intersection, and 28 vehicle-pedestrian conflict points. That's indicated in the yellow squares. So a lot of different conflict points at this intersection. And then you add on the expansive amount of pavement, and it just exacerbates the situation. A roundabout, obviously one of the purposes is to reduce those potential conflict points. And in fact, it reduces the 45 down to 9 vehicle-to-vehicle conflict points and pedestrians from 28 to 9. So inherently, just the reduced number of conflict points will make it safer. And in addition, slower speeds at the roundabout will lead to safer conditions. And because of the slower speeds, typically if there is a crash that occurs, it will typically be less severe because of the slower speeds. So roundabout design today is not as, well, let me say it another way. Roundabouts didn't used to be prevalent. There's more and more of them happening every day. So the design of a roundabout 10, 15, 20 years ago was kind of a unique design. But today, there's a lot of them going into New York State, throughout the country. So the design of them is becoming more of the norm, and it's not an unusual design. So I didn't want to bore you with designs of how we came up with the splitter angles and the radius, developing the radius of the roundabout and the inner circle. I wanted to talk more about the challenges we ran across in the design and construction of an urban roundabout. Some of them, if you have something like this in your future, they may not be exactly similar challenges, but they may be similar challenges. So I wanted to talk about the ones we ran across in this particular project. And I'll talk about each one of these in a little more detail. First, the McDonald's access. The McDonald's is located at the southeast quadrant of the intersection. And having spent a lot of time down there, I can tell you that coffee in the morning, lunch at noon, and dinner at night, this is one of the busiest McDonald's I've personally ever seen. I don't sit out in a lot of McDonald's watching the traffic every day, but this was a very, very busy McDonald's. Their access, their driveway access, if you can see, it's near the northern part of their property, very close to the intersection. And I'll show you this on a set of design plans. The yellow driveway is where their driveway was located. As you can see, it would have exited, people were exiting and entering in the splitter road. So that's certainly not a safe situation. So simply, we really need to just relocate it. It may seem simple, and ultimately, it in some cases, it would be very simple. Well, let's just shift it to the south and move it further away from the intersection. Well, a couple of issues associated with it. When we were near the late stages of design, at the same time we were there, McDonald's, as many McDonald's throughout the country are doing, they decided to do a reorganization and reconfiguration of their entire on-site operations, not only from people, how they went in and out of the building, but how people got in and out of the store, where their deliveries were made, where their drive-through was. That was a major issue. That was changing at the same time we were trying to finalize our drawings. So we had some significant coordination with them, and we came up with the driveway highlighted in blue. The intent of that driveway is for people to enter, circulate the building, and get in a drive-through queue that is now at the south end of the building, a dual drive-through. Well, people really want their hamburgers, they want their coffee. So a lot of unusual things were happening, primarily because they didn't want to circulate the building. They would come in the entrance, jump the island, get in the drive-through queue that way. What was happening there is people were backing out or backing up into the, traffic was backing up into North Main Street, creating a hazardous situation. Or people were coming in the exit lane and jumping in to the drive-through lane. Neither of those is a desirable situation. It's going to lead to some crashes and some people getting injured. So we actually had to make some changes during construction to stop that kind of thing from happening. The other issue associated with this driveway is, you can see just to the south, there's a Walgreens. You can't see the Walgreens, but just to the south, there's a Walgreens driveway. This is their primary access in and off of Main Street. It's a right in, right out. Or not right in, right out. You can access the driveway from both directions, both entering and exiting. What we wanted to do is, because how close this new driveway was to the existing Walgreens driveway, we wanted to make sure we weren't creating a hazard by allowing people exiting Walgreens headed north, conflicting with people exiting McDonald's and heading south. So we had to turn the McDonald's driveway into when you're exiting, a right turn only. People wanting to go south would have to utilize the roundabout, or on the roundabout head south, or utilize their access onto 3rd Street, utilize the roundabout and head south. So what seemed like it might be pretty simple, just slide the driveway 75, 80 feet to the south, ended up being quite a challenging and complicated situation. It's working well now. The owners of McDonald's are fairly happy. I don't think they were happy during construction, but not many businesses are. But we got through it, and it's a much better operational situation than it could have been. The public utilities. We've got the combined sewer and the water line. I want to talk about the water line first, because that was a unique situation. Typically, in a lot of designs, any relocations or need to upgrade or whatever, your water lines get included in the design plans. But the Elmira Water Board, who is a separate entity, they felt like they had the resources, they had the time, and they had the staff to be able to do this on their own, because there was time to do it. So they elected to do that. The problem is that they wanted to do this before we had completed the design. Matter of fact, they wanted to do it when we were still in the preliminary design phase. So we were able to give them what we had at that phase, which was primarily curb, finalized or pretty close to final line curb lines, but very little, if any, drainage. They took our information, backing up a little bit, we did kind of tell them if they did it before we were completed with design, there may be a need to relocate relocate some of their water line. So we gave them our drawings. They went out, relocated based on those drawings, and they sent us their point data. We replotted the new relocated water line, and then we moved forward our design. When we got to advanced detailed plans, which is about 85–90% drawings, we sent the water board all the new conflicts because we now have had our drainage all settled out, and there was a significant amount. I would say somewhere in the neighborhood of 20% to 25% of the water line that was relocated needed to be relocated again. So we went through the same process. We gave them our design drawings, they relocated, they gave us our points back. Warned them that things change in the field when you get into construction, so there may be some water lines that need to be relocated again. And in fact, I think there was 3 or 4 locations where they had to relocate again. I don't know how it ended up from a financial standpoint. It seemed like a lot of resources were spent to do this 3 times. I guess lesson learned, I would try to encourage your local water boards or bureaus to get this stuff in the design plans. I can tell Andy, I spoke with Andy the other day, and he said in subsequent projects since then, the water bureau, the water board is having that done as part of the design plans, and just paying a share of the cost, their share of the cost. The sewer, built in 1897, very, very flat. Here you see it superimposed over the design drawings. As you can see, goes right through the center of the roundabout. You'll see later on when I show you what's ends up in the middle of that roundabout, why we had to get that out of there for future maintenance costs, because it's a system being well over 100 or over 120 years old, you're going to have some maintenance issues. Our concern was that of the flatness and the fact that we had to separate combine or storm from sanitary, because we're in a Elmira's in an MS4 area, so we had to separate the sewers, and we had to maintain at least enough flow so there wouldn't be debris. We got a little bit fortunate because here's the configuration of what we ended up with. We were able to sever the north-south route that went down to 3rd Street and reduce some flows, which allowed us to reroute the main sewer to the north of the roundabout and still maintain enough gradient on it to not create a situation where we have debris buildup in the pipes. So the bigger issue became we're trying to connect materials made in 2018 at the time, 2018, 2019, to materials that were put in place in 1897. I want to give the contractor full credit for creating, I can't show you the details of the details because it was kind of done in the field, but they very creative in their connections, how they were able to connect plastic pipe with old pipe and still have a good connection, and we tested it for leakage and there was no leakage. So hopefully, I'm sure they're going to hold up for a long time, and the city won't have to go back in there and do any repairs. So it was a challenge that was, most cities have sewers and water lines. So dealing with your utilities when you're building a roundabout can be quite a challenge. I want to talk a little bit about the community. Some of the things I'm going to say are I'm allowed to say because I'm a native of Elmira, so and my family still lives there. So I can tell you that the community, the city of Elmira in general, just does not like change. It's changing a little bit with some of the leadership, but it basically don't like change. When this first started getting in the press and in the media, people were like, what the heck are you doing? This is a dumb idea. You're going to put me out of business. Stop this nonsense. nobody will come. I won't be able to figure out how to get around that roundabout. I won't be safe. And even my grandmother was not very happy with me. So just not understanding the benefits of the roundabout really was making people not want to have this happen. So we decided to take a different approach versus just having me stand up in front of the community and the public for an hour, hour and a half, talking to them about the numbers and the safety and everything. We came up with a program that was really an education program. We wanted to educate the community as a whole before we started any design. We held a meeting with city council, including the mayor and the city manager, to talk about these things like the graphic I showed you before, and this is just a standard graphic, about the safety benefits, about how it would help the businesses in the long run, how it would help to bring economic development to an area because you made it safer and nicer looking. That way they would be educated and be able to go to their constituents, hearing from their own representatives versus hearing from a consultant that they don't really know. Did the same thing with local businesses, helping them to understand the benefits of safety, and people will likely come to your area if it's safer, and it'll help to draw economic benefits to your area, which will ultimately help your business. And also talk to them about how their operations would happen during construction and after construction. So we had several meetings with the local businesses, just them. We had separate meetings with emergency services because we wanted to ensure them that all of their vehicles would be able to maneuver their way through this intersection safely and more efficiently. We offered actually to create this graphic that you see, a mock-up roundabout in a parking lot somewhere locally in the mall area, to have them bring their vehicles and allow their folks that drive their vehicles to maneuver their way through a mocked-up a roundabout. They did not elect to do this. They kind of put the trust in us that we would coordinate with them and make sure that we would make sure all their vehicles would be able to get through here safely and efficiently. And then the public had anxiety. We met with them with the approach of education, not trying to jam something down their throat, but helping them to understand the benefits to the community as a whole. We felt that the whole process was very successful. I'm sure it was successful with the city leadership and the businesses and the emergency services, and we thought we had success with the public. But after our public meetings, we had this. So I don't think we helped some of the public through this whole process. There's a faction of the community that was not real happy with this, no matter what we told them, and tried to stop the project. But we were moving forward because the city leadership and all knew that this was for the betterment of the entire city. Time will tell. I'm confident that this will be a benefit. But, I guess Andy and the staff and the city will tell us as time goes by. The last challenge I want to talk about is the aesthetics. And this challenge was more fun than it was still a challenge, but it was kind of fun. Here's our palette. We had this empty palette of a lot of new areas to provide landscaping and streetscaping and amenities. And then we had the roundabout, which was a large landscape, a large palette of it by itself. Our goal was to create a nicer area to just come and be around for everyone, pedestrians, bicyclists, vehicles, business owners, just a nicer place to be. Our intent was to create a gateway, a dual gateway at the roundabout, a gateway that would be for people traveling, south to north from the city into the educational area and points north, and for those traveling south from the educational area into the city. We wanted to create a dual gateway that would serve both purposes. The first thing we did was to create a very well-rounded task force made up of local representation, local representatives, city and county engineering. New York State DOT was involved throughout the process, veterans organizations, the community arts, the general public was represented, and of course the consultant team. We wanted to develop a theme. We couldn't just go nilly-willy and just start throwing different amenities out here. We wanted it to mean something and have a purpose. So our idea was to develop a theme, and we would base that theme on, make sure that the theme included the history of Elmira, the people of Elmira, and the geography of Elmira. After several iterations, several meetings, all really good, productive meetings with that entire task force that I talked about, we came up with two primary themes to discuss further. First, being an education-based theme, because of its proximity to Elmira College. The center of the roundabout would be, in this scenario, the center would be focused on education. And then the second theme was an environmental or a geography-based theme, which would focus on the surrounding topography, the surrounding features, the river, the mountains, the birds and fish and stuff like that. So that was the second theme. What we concluded was we kind of would have a combination of both, where the central island would focus on the geography theme, local quarries, Chemung River, birds of prey and native birds, native fish. And then on the outskirts, on the sidewalks primarily, we would include quotes in granite from local artists, famous Elmirans, famous Elmira scholars. So we kind of were able to bring both of those themes together into one. And I'll show you some pictures. You'll see some pictures of the ultimate outcome in a few minutes. This did not go without glitch. As I said, DOT was involved throughout this process, and we got to advanced detailed plans. They were reviewing the design, and we got an unexpected comment, I should say. You can't have those boulders in the roundabout in the central island. And we shrugged our shoulders and said, what happened? We've been doing this for over a year, and what happened? Well, they actually had a very good reason for why they brought that comment up. And that reason is, south of Buffalo in New York State DOT Region 5, there was a rural roundabout that had much smaller, but nonetheless, boulders in the center island. A vehicle traveling late at night or early morning, whatever you want to call it, at a speed higher than the speed limit, and the person did have a couple drinks in them, did not follow the roundabout, went through the center of the roundabout and hit a boulder, and unfortunately was fatally injured. So that's not a good situation for anyone. The state, rightfully so, did not want to introduce something that was going to be a hazard. So what do we do now? We're nearly complete with the project. The funding has got some time constraints on it. What are we going to do? We decided to take two parallel paths. One, looking for, and we didn't want to take the time to redesign the whole roundabout. That would take way too, or the whole central island. That would take way too much time. Two parallel paths. One, look for opportunity, look for manufacturers who can create these boulders and make them look real. And the second path was to do our research, gather the data, and help DOT understand that this was not a hazardous situation. Well, the first path, we looked all throughout the country, and I can tell you we found several places that could produce fake boulders like this, but they did not look good. It would not have been a good situation. Any high winds, or they got damaged by, they'd easily be able to be vandalized. So, excuse me, we really did not want to go that route. At the same time, we were doing our technical research and stuff, and we had several meetings with DOT. We were able to present a plan that showed this. The differences between the two situations. That was a rural roundabout, higher speeds, not well lit. This is an urban roundabout, very well lit, much lower speeds. So pretty significant differences just from that. We were then able to utilize the data in design manuals of sight distance and clear zone. We showed the DOT that not only that the boulders did not impact the sight distance for oncoming vehicles, but also they were well outside the clear zone. Ultimately, New York State DOT agreed with our position and allowed us to move forward with our original design. And thank goodness for that, because this could have been a whole different presentation if that was not the case. So what we had envisioned back before construction happened and before detailed design ever happened was this: the large boulders representing local quarries with flat top mountains that are indicative of the surrounding area, a wireframe birds, prey, the osprey and the bald eagle, the stone between the stones between the two boulders you see here actually was riverbed made up of, to represent the riverbed of the Chemung River. So this is what we had envisioned, and this is what is out there today. I've got some more current pictures that'll show you as it's a springtime thing. But this is what we had today. Pretty good representation. So the contractor and the design team was able to recreate what was visioned in a very good way. Here's a drone picture of the intersection itself. Please notice the beautiful church in the background, and the fact that there's no buildings in front of it. I want to tell you a quick story as we get through this about that building if I have the time. A little bit of costs. Again, we initially bid it in April 2018. As I mentioned, it was delayed a few months because of the boulder issue. We were going to do it in January. We all knew the risk of bidding it in April, that we were condensing the construction season, so it could be reflected in higher bids. But we wanted to do it anyway. We didn't want to miss an opportunity if there was a hungry contractor out there. We did bid it. It came in about $500,000 above our engineer's estimate. So we decided to rebid it again. We really didn't change anything except for we had a few add alternates included in the original bid. We decided to consolidate them and just have one base bid. So we rebid it in January with an engineer's estimate of a little over 4.9 million. Bid came in at 4.6 million. Was awarded to Sealand Construction, and they are completed with the job, and I can happily tell you that I believe the final construction cost came in below the bid price. So that makes everybody contributing money a lot happier. I want to show you some quick construction photos. I'll talk as I go along because I know it's getting a little late in the game, but nothing. People have all seen construction photos. A couple of things to note: that we were able to maintain traffic on site with the exception of large trucks who were detoured during the construction of the actual roundabout. That does not mean that they followed the detour route. Some of them did not. They ruined wet concrete and hit some poles that were in place. So we couldn't design around people who won't follow the rules, but we were able to maintain traffic on site for the most part. The church in the background, real quick story. There's a building there. It's Evergreen Express Chinese restaurant. Really thought in my mind when I was going through early stages of design, boy, wouldn't it be nice if that building wasn't there? We were not impacting it by the design of our project. Wouldn't it be nice? So I created a photo simulation with the building gone, and I ended up presenting it at the public meeting and made the owner very, very, very unhappy. What are you doing taking my building? And I tried to reassure him we weren't, but a mistake on my behalf of not talking with him and explaining him the situation. So just be aware of that kind of thing. In the sidewalk pictures, you can see where we're creating spaces for the granite curb to go in with the engravings. The truck apron here, and nearing completion. there's a picture of what the church looks like with the building in front of it. It's a picture of the day they put the boulders in. This area here is an educational area at the point. We actually installed an informational sign that told, was able to describe what all the elements of the Central Island were, so the people weren't saying, what the heck does all that stuff mean? One element missing here, there was a pad out there for a statue. And it was a statue, intended to be a statue of a pig, Patty's pig to be specific. The history of Elmira shows that there was at one time a pig that wandered this part of the city, became affectionately known as Patty's pig. It was originally in the design plans. FHWA, for some reason, I say that jokingly, didn't think that was a transportation element, so they didn't want to pay for it. So it was taken out of the project. Hopefully someday the city finds some money to commission someone to create this pig and put it there, because it is a pretty unique part of the city, and this was the area where it wandered. For those of interest, if you Google Patty's pig, Paddys pig, Elmira, New York, I'll guarantee you a picture of the pig comes up. This is a photo taken during the ribbon cutting. Real brief on the stones. These boulders could not be all brought to the site in one piece. They had to be, there was 3 or 4 pieces in some of them because of how heavy they were. So the contractor was not willing to just bring, haul granite from central Pennsylvania to the project site and then have the city or the consultant say, well, we don't like that. So they asked us to go to them. So myself and Roger O'Toole, a former employee of the city, made the trip, about a 4-hour trip down there from Rochester anyway, about a 4-hour trip down there to see the stones. Now, I'm an engineer. I have no creative side of my brain, so my choice would have been how to pick this stuff in the top left. But fortunately, Roger had that creative mind, and he was able to see, envision a rock feature and understand how it would be cut, how it would look when it was got in the field, on site. So fortunately, I give a lot of credit to Roger for having that vision to be able to do that. I did learn a lot about quarries and how they operate, and I did learn how they actually cut granite, and it's actually not a very safe operation. So there was some of that safety issues prevented us from cutting stones the way we really would have wanted them to. So, but I did learn a lot about quarries and cutting stones. Took them about an entire day to place them with a crane on site and several workforce to do it. Make sure it got level both horizontally and vertically. So it was a very interesting process. And here's what it looks like today. Notice the building is gone. The photo is being taken from the center of the roadway. So if it was taken from the roadway itself, you'd be able to see the church in its entirety. But it looks a lot better without that building. What happened was another entity, Andy mentioned them, the name slips my mind right now, but they bought the building, tore it down, and was donating it to, I think, Elmira College. But it looks a lot better without the building there. Whoops, let me go back one. Here's another area, another drone photo of the area. Here is a close-up of some of the artwork. The fish were sandblasted in there, the wireframe birds, and some of the quotes. I can tell you that all of these elements, the arts elements, were done by local artists, which they were all very proud to have been a part of the project. The lady who did the wire birds was very emotional during the ribbon cutting. So pretty unique features. The ribbon cutting itself, very, very well attended. I know the chairs look empty in the one photo, but that's because everybody was up in the picture. But very, very well attended, very well supported by most of the city. I joke about people that were against it, but I think ultimately that was a minority. The city as a whole will benefit from this. And I look forward to hearing the results as we move forward down the road. I want to thank you for your time. I don't know if Emily can tell us if there any questions came came up during, but I will be happy to answer any of them both now, or you can email me in the future. There's our contact information for both Andy and I. So Emily, go ahead.
Thank you everybody for joining us. I know this was a full hour presentation, but I think a very interesting topic, and has some elements that we don't otherwise get to experience all the time on our projects. We don't currently have any questions in the chat. If anybody has questions, you feel free to enter them now. Otherwise, as Dennis said, you can reach out directly to him or Andy subsequent to this to get more specifics on anything that was covered today, or in general, if you have questions about things, other things that may or may not have been done as part of the project. Again, I'd like to thank you all for coming and joining us today. And I hope you found this informative and enjoyed your time with us. There still don't appear to be any questions. So with that, we will wrap this up, and thank you again.
Thank you, everyone.